All right, we're live again. Welcome, everybody, to the Talk With Kiet podcast, where we connect people, ideas, and capital to help make a difference in the world. Now, I've taken the summer break off, as I'm sure many of you have been aware. You haven't heard from me in a while. Um, but I'm back. It's been quite interesting and exciting to be doing this for a better part of the year. I really thought about, stop the Talk With Kiet podcast, but then a lot of people, Kit, you're crazy. We're loving the conversations. We're loving the discussions. So Talk With Kiet lives on. But I'd be much more selective. I won't be doing as frequent. But what I want to do is really bring very interesting people, very interesting conversations to the community. And so I'm super excited today because to me, this is the first time where you have two trans on a podcast on the same show.
Unrelated.
That's right. Unrelated. We're not related. But today I'm so blessed to have Jane Tran on with us. Jane is the co-founder and COO of SixFold AI. Jane and I today will talk about her extensive career and entrepreneurial journey, as well as talk about how to launch an AI startup. Jane, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
So, Jane, as part of tradition, where and how we start the show is to talk about you and your origin story. So what is the Jane Tran origin story?
I think the Jane Tran origin story is really just fueled by curiosity. I actually thought that I would be working in nonprofit and government for most of my life. And in just a string of events, ended up in entrepreneurship. And a lot of it just had to do with curiosity. At school, I interned for, a governor, a mayor, a bunch of nonprofits. And I think the pace wasn't necessarily for me. Love the work. It's just really the pace and like what I can get my hands on. And so ended up taking an internship at a bank at JP Morgan and fell in love with it. Just the opportunity, the people, and spent a number of years at JP doing process improvement and turnarounds. Got poached to go to Marsh and McLennan. Then from there went to MetLife. And again, fueled by curiosity, just worked and talked to as many people as possible. And there I met Gary Hoberman, the founder and CEO of Uncork. Went over to the tech world side. Uncork is the no-code development platform for enterprise. Helped build that company from the ground up. And then I think I left at the end of last year and started SixFold this year with my current co-founders, Alex and Brian.
No, that's an amazing story. Now, before we go into SixFold and talk about AI, which everyone's talking about, let's talk about that whole Uncork journey, because you guys took Uncork from an idea to a unicorn to a 500 person team pretty fast, right? Tell us about that experience.
Yeah, I think this is a testament to Gary, I would say. So he had this idea for a long time coming, and it was really on, there has to be a way. Let me take a step back, actually. So in the insurance market, in the US, an average person has about 2 to 3 insurance policies. But if you look to a market like Asia, that are more risk adverse, they have about 5 to 6 policies per person. And as a result of that, companies need to innovate a lot faster. So you need to put out new insurance products at a much faster pace than you would in the US. As a result of that sort of need, that market need, Gary actually came up with this idea of like a configurable product, right? Like, because actually, if you think about a lot of these financial instruments, right, they don't change that much from year to year, but you do need to make some tweaks to it to make it new and novel as you're filing before you go to market. And so that was actually the onset of what we built Uncork with. And the cool part about that is, we were all handpicked, right? So Gary and I really liked working with each other. And he brought the rest of the founding team of Uncork together. I basically got a phone call, actually a text message like, Jane, meet here at 6 p.m. And then I had no idea what it was. I think I had a bit of an inclination. Yeah. And then we actually showed up at a design agency that I'm working out of right now, Cake and Arrow, to actually start and form Uncork. And so it was a crazy journey, but I think it was really led by a lot of trust of the idea and what we needed to do. And also a lot of education, because when we first started, no one knew what no code was. And now there's so many types of configurable products out there. So it's it's really interesting and sort of like so awe-inspiring to see how fast the industry moves.
Yeah, and talk about the whole people and hiring experience to going from like 0 to 500 in that short time period.
Yeah, I think a lot of it was, I think just like, at least for me, like I probably personally hired a good chunk of the company. And um, hiring for us was really interesting because we were building a new paradigm, right? Like, as I mentioned earlier, no one really knew what no code was. So we had this platform that was horizontal and very flexible, and we were the only people that knew how to use it. So, how do we get other people to want to start using this platform? And in a way, we sort of had to homegrown that, right? So, I built a team called Solutions. Shout out to the Solutions team. And they were just full of people that were innately very curious, somewhat technical, and love solving problems, right? And like I think like finding the core aspects of like what you need to start like driving adoption of this platform was really important for us. And the way that we did it was, anchoring on probably stronger senior talent, and then building it up so everyone can start like having a mentor, have like really healthy sort of challenges with each other on what they can and can't do, and sort of like that love for like knowledge and discovery was really important as we're building out like that ecosystem. And even now, it's actually really cool. A good chunk of former actually uncorkers created this company called Oxo, and they're a systems integrator dedicated to building on the Uncork platform. And that's, I think, a testament to, again, like building out that ecosystem, that flywheel to like wanting to learn like a no-code platform.
So was local no code the predecessor to this whole like ChatGPT open AI like massive craziness?
I don't think so. I would say like yes and no, right? Like I think one is sort of so much more focused on like uh, data, and the other one I think is a little bit more focused on like workflow. I think one can complement the other though. But I think they're just both really cool technologies that came out in the last decade.
Yeah. And so what made you decide then to go from yes, you left Encore and then you started SixFold AI. Like what inspired the launch of SixFold?
Yeah. So my co-founders and I, Alex and I actually were both part of the founding team at Uncork, and we both happened to exit at the same time. He ended up becoming entrepreneur in residence at Bessemer, and I, worked with a bunch of early stage accelerators, and we always just kept in touch, right? And he actually came up with the idea when he saw, something about classification, and he thought that once the LLMs came about, he can probably marry that with the classifications. And we realized like, oh, there's a really huge gap within the insurance underwriting market, and we should go for it. For me, I think there's more of a personal reason, and I think it all just like timed perfectly for us to come together. After I left Uncork, it's I was very personally attached to Uncork in a great way, but I wanted to see like, what do I care about, within society to like, that I actually really want to do next, right? Because at the core of it, I'm still like an operator. And I realized I really do care about elder care. And for elder care, I think like I was chatting through with a bunch of folks, like, what would actually be beneficial for folks as they're aging, things like that. And I basically landed on the notion that like, long-term care insurance is probably the solve for a lot of the things that we need in elder care. But coverage for elder care is really complex, right? And I think a lot of insurance companies no longer actually underwrite LTC for a slew of reasons, including underwriting. And so when Alex sort of chatted about his whole idea about like generative AI for insurance underwriting, I was like, oh, that's actually a really great marriage, because like if we can help, insurance companies improve their capacity to underwrite, improve their accuracy to underwrite, improve their compliance around underwriting. Like I can innately turn to like help something that I actually really care about, which I think will be really important. And so Alex and I, once he came up with this idea, asked me, I happened to be thinking about the same thing, and then we ended up bringing Brian on as well. That's sort of how SixFold came to be.
No, that's amazing. Now, when you started Encore, a lot of these AI technology wasn't widely available versus now. So how are you building SixFold differently with a lot of the tech
Yeah.
that's out there?
Like AI has been around for a while. I think generative AI hasn't been around for a while. And I think with us, because we're truly generative AI, like we are not using any of the old school, machine learning type things. Everything that we're doing is purely generative. And so as a company, we're also thinking through in terms of because it's a generative AI company and because a lot of these paradigms have not been created before, what do we know is true and can sort of build that way? And what do we know is not true that we have to test really quickly? For example, like we're an enterprise company, right? We sell B2B. We know enterprise tech, like that, those patterns, those frameworks, we know how to do. And that's everything from setting up really sound single tenant infrastructure, getting your SOC 2 type 2, like we know how to do all of that. What's really fun about generative is like, it's changing so quickly. I always say like a day in generative is like a month because so much just changes in the blink of an eye. So for us, it's like, all right, we have to commit really quickly, understand first principles, in terms of, the stack that we're using, sort of those types of things, and be willing to just like pivot really quickly because of how often technology changes. Sometimes we're like, do we put this on technology that was built 4 months ago, or do we put this on technology that was built 1 week ago? And like we just have to commit to it and see how it evolves.
Yeah, it is moving very fast, right? It just feels like, and I don't know, it's because it's now in the hands of your everyday consumer, or it's always been there, but it just feels like every few months I see a new update. Something's very different. It's very didn't exist like a few months ago.
Yeah, and I think this is one of the things where open source has been amazing, for things like generative. It's because so many people are trying to build things, because they see the power. Kudos to the folks at OpenAI for just putting out a really easy to use chat interface that just gives you this level of awe. Because what I would say for starting SixFold and how it was so different than starting Uncork was that I don't have to explain to anyone what generative AI is or GPT. People know exactly what that is, right? And they already understand the power of it. And now for us, it's like, how do we harness that power and marry that with literally the data within these insurance companies and really purpose build those models for our customers so they can actually do this thing better. So being hyper focused has been really great, but also understanding, still keeping abreast of what's changing, what do we have to be aware of, how does that still serve our end goal, which is to help insurance underwriting. That's really what has been driving us, but it's definitely anchoring on first principles and trying to move as fast as possible.
So you raise a good point, and the question is, I see there's three pieces of the puzzle, right? There's the AI tech tooling, there's the data, and then there's the expertise on how to hold that all together. Which part of the equation is more important than the other, or is it all equally important?
Yeah, and we chatted about this a little bit ago, and there's a lot of data out there. And a lot of these companies, financial institutions, insurance companies, so on, right? There's so much data out there. Just because you have the data doesn't mean you know what to do with the data, right? And I think a lot of companies have done a really great job, getting their data to work for them. But I think with the power of LLMs, it's a mix of having that data, knowing what you want to do with that data, and then add the LLM component to it to really like get to that end result, right? Because in a way, like if you have so much stuff, it's hard to start where to actually do something with that stuff,
It's more
right?
overwhelming, right? It's like it's more
Super
noise.
overwhelming.
Yeah.
It's super overwhelming, right? And it's so I think like us being hyper focused again is really important, but then like marrying it with like if our sole goal is to make insurance underwriting like as seamless as possible for the underwriters, like that's how we're going to fine tune. That's how are we going to sort of get to this end goal as fast as possible.
Yeah. And so what would you say, like if someone were to want to launch like an AI startup, like what are some of the, I guess, the segments and themes that you see as big opportunity aside from insurance that you're
Yeah.
seeing?
So there's sort of two categories of AI companies I say right now, and it's basically horizontal or vertical, right? Horizontal are a lot of the tooling, right? Like, you know, you have your OpenAI, your Anthropics, all those types of things. They have a lot of capital to deploy to build a lot of sort of utility type functions, you know, for the rest of the ecosystem, which is great. The other side of it is verticalized solutions, which is what SixFold is. Our hypothesis for vertical solutions is threefold. The first one is actually being first to market makes a huge difference, right? We talked about how quickly generative AI is moving. So, you know, sort of putting a stake in the ground to say that you're doing this and sort of there, you will find people that want to use that use case. The second thing is really easy to use product and customer experience. You know, as with anything, right? Going back to like what we said about OpenAI and GPT, like it was such a delightful and easy to use moment when people first started using it. They're like, oh my God, right? Like you have to think about that aha moment, like that really like that adoption, you know, for generative because it's so new. So I think as you're thinking about like how to make this super easy to use, I think that's super important. And I think the third thing is relationships, right? It's like a sort of a relationships and knowledge thing. We picked insurance underwriting because it's something that we know. We've been working in it for a very long time. And it's, you know, it's a complex market. So like we think we can actually like do something really great with it because we know the industry. I think as folks are thinking about where they want to start, like I think having a bit of knowledge, as we said, about like having the data doesn't mean you know what to do with that data. You sort of have to figure out what to do with that data, and having a little bit of background, having the relationships to point to say like, hey, does this make sense to you? You know, would you buy this? Like, I think that's really important as well.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. Now back to that, because I'm very curious on the build process. Because do you need less people now that there's co-piloting and AI writing code? Like is that the case, or that's still not the case?
Yeah. So both of my co-founders, Alex and Brian, both developers, they will never not use Copilot again. Like in previous lives, like either it was banned from their enterprise or things like that, but they will never not code with it again. And the part of it is it just knows, and like having that assistant with you to basically like before you would have to while you're coding, it's like you forgot how to do something or forgot a syntax, like you'll go to like Google, Stack Overflow, a Discord channel. But like now it's like it just knows, right? And it just saves you so much time. That being said, the caveat is you still actually need to know how to code because like sometimes it is wrong, right? But so you'll need to know how to diagnose, diagnose the problem.
Yeah.
So like know, again, going back to first principles, but it is a huge time saver. And yeah, I don't see a situation where we don't have that.
Yeah, because there was some stat that I think Nick mentioned months ago. One of my previous guests was like, was it 40% of codes that are put into GitHub or like Copilot codes?
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure that's grown somewhat from that point. But
yeah, and it's
interesting.
only getting better the more people are using it as well.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So what do you, and maybe this is a loaded question. What do you see the end state of AI? Like where do you really think it's all going?
I think I think for us, I think it's really like how will it truly get integrated, you know, with the ways that we work, right? And I think that's still like time will tell. I think is really it. I think AI is a little bit different than some of the other technologies that have come before, mostly because it's, um, it's sort of doing the work of a knowledge worker, right? Like the reason why LLMs are powerful is because it has human level comprehension. So as a result of that, the way in which we integrate it within our work is also different than some of the other things that came before, right? If we think about every digital transformation project that we've ever worked on, right, that's always like streamlining a process. It's like, creating a new workflow. But with AI, it's almost like this meta layer, this brain on top of that, right? So like, if that's the ground rules, like how do I interact with it in a way that's different or in a way that's more complementary than the ways that I've been working on today?
Yeah. And do you have a view around, like we've seen a lot of news where, authors are suing LLM tool providers, like data providers, like, well, you took my data to run this model. I've never given you permission. That's
Mhm.
whole like, whose data is it? Like what can be or can't be used situation with the AI movement.
Yeah, look, I think if it's your text, right? Like meaning it's your book, all of those types of things. It's still actually like the author's data. There is open data, but there is also private data, and I
Yeah.
think there's definitely a fine line, right? Because even if you use like GPT today, it's basically the average of the internet. You're not
Oh, that's
getting
an
like
interesting point. Yeah.
it's the average of the internet, right? So like,
Yeah.
and if you think about, some of like the best book you've ever read or whatever, it's not average, right? Like it's above average. And I think there's still value and like there's still always a need, I think, for that human level creativity. Because what I use like these things for, it's like to get a baseline, right? Like you need someone to help brainstorm something with, but to put your voice into it, to put your to help catalyze another idea, you're adding to it to make it more personalized. Like you're still adding sort of those pieces to it. So if you want to be above average, I think that's still definitely a thing. And I do think like we'll see how it goes with some of these with some of the legal data battles that are in market, and I think they're totally valid, right? Because unless if it's not open, like then it's sort of like a closed data set. Like how we think about other types of closed data sets, what would be that model to use? Like that's no different than how we think about Bloomberg data today, or Refinitiv or IHS type market. IHS like sort of type data. It's closed data sets that are really valuable, really important. And if we want to use it, like you sort of have to pay to play.
Yeah, no, exactly. I guess what that means is people with a large data estate's gonna win big time in this whole AI world that we're heading towards.
I think so, especially if you're building within that market set. I think there's definitely some value to it, and it's just knowing like what data is still valuable within that market or not, right? So like because there is a threshold on like data that we expect to be open and data that is probably more proprietary.
Yeah. So pivot a bit to the personal life in terms of, juggling professional and personal life in a startup world. How do you manage maintain mental health
Yeah, for
with
me,
all
it's
these
all routine.
uncertainty?
It's all
Routine.
routine. It's all
Okay.
routine.
Like do you
Um,
like wake up at 5 a.m. and like do push-ups, like that type of routine?
uh, it's more like 6:30, but yes, it's like, yeah. I think it's sort of trying to find like what works for you.
Yeah.
I I'm like not a person with a ton of hobbies, but like I do appreciate a routine to sort of get me like started for the day. Like I need to go running. I actually need to get my coffee from my coffee person. I need to read a lot of news in the morning before I start my day. It's like sort of like, how do you prep for your mental state? Like, if you have this constant, like that means I can do everything else. Is the way that I operate. Um, and like I still know when I can log off and things like that as well. Like I know I'm best when I do all of those things. So how can I make sure that I optimize for it? And when things come up, they come up, and then I'll compensate for it like the next day. in terms of like, maybe leaving a little bit earlier or things like that. But it's just being really cognizant on like what works for you is really important. And I think it took some time for me to figure out what actually works for me.
Yeah, because it's tricky, right? When you work for a large corporate, there's like structure, there's things in place. But when you're working for a startup, like how do you navigate that? And even for people that are either looking to launch a startup or work for a startup, like what's some of your advice for them in terms of how to like handle the flexibility that they all are going through?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is still with goals, right? Like, sort of in a way, like as you're in big companies, like the more senior you get, like no one's really going to tell you what to do. You sort of have to put in the structure yourself and tell people what to do, right? It's a very similar mindset, right? So no one's going to really tell you what to do at a startup. You sort of know that you just have to get some stuff done. So if that's the case, like what is your personal sort of goals that you need to get done? Probably, I always encourage people to think at a very high level. So if like, I don't have 5-year plans, I probably think, probably a couple months out, but like in whatever, like what is that thing that we sort of need to get, that we need to get done, and sort of like break it down from there. And from there, it's just like, okay, if this is what I need to get done in 3 months, and this is what I need to get it in 1 month, this is what I need to get done like now. And I think sort of having that probably systematic way of like thinking about it probably is a good way to organize. Other folks, it could be just a trial and error type message. I don't think there's any one way to do it, in all honesty. And again, I think it really what works for you. And I think especially like in a post-COVID world, people are also like rethinking what works for them, including myself actually. And so I'd say just try it. If it feels great and you're getting the right results, just continue it and just see what the limits are. And then if it's not working, just pull back and then try something else. It's still the whole like, like commit, fail fast, pivot type of mentality.
Yeah. Now the other thing is, you and I talked about this earlier. Is you run into more trends recently, unrelated to any of us.
Yeah.
Like, how do we get like? Are you seeing more and more minorities in startups and senior like positions, or there's still a lot of work to be done?
I mean, I think there's always still work to be done. I've seen a lot, and I think I've always been given a lot of opportunities. So, like, I'm really grateful for everything that I've been a part of. But I think it goes with anything else. It's like, invest in talent, invest in diversity as like if that's a core, value to you. But I do think it's important. I do think having different, schools of thought is important. I think having different viewpoints is important. So, I just love that I've been meeting a lot of trans in the last couple of months that are not part of my immediate family.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm more aware, but I noticed like there's a lot more now Asian startup founders in the States, right? I'm running into more and more of them. And like this talk today is amazing, right? Having 2 trans on the same call. I absolutely love it.
And I do think there's a lot more even like capital providers that are thinking about it, right? Like I think like I'm associated with Larry's Labs, and they have a mindset of like globalization, right? If you're a startup that, wants to go global or have like a global founder, like that's something that they're really interested in. And it's great because like, I don't think a decade ago that was available. So I think a lot has been done. So like people like, know that they can do it. And I think that's really important. And I think we just have to continue sort of building around that.
No, that's awesome. Well, Jane, thank you for being on today. It was an amazing conversation. Now, usually where we end, it's really your ask to the audience in terms of, what you need of them and how they can help you.
Yeah, I guess like if you are an insurance company, an underwriter that wants to try something new, generative AI for insurance underwriting, just reach out, give us a call. We're happy to do a demo of our solution. We think you'll be really happy with it. My other plug, if I can add one more, is
Definitely.
I am also the co-chair of a nonprofit organization called Womankind. Womankind helps survivors of gender-based violence in the New York City area. They're also AAPI focused. They've been helping survivors for a very long time. They do really great work, full life cycle. So if you want to get involved, please also reach out. We're always looking for great talent there as well.
Great. Thank you, Jane, so much for being on today. Thank you to the audience. It's your continued support that keeps this chat going. So thank you as always, and have a good day. Thank you,
Great.
everybody.
Thanks, Kit. Later.
Bye-bye.